Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions on the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like what you hear or watch, now that we're doing video versions of this show, and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening, watching, whatever is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with your friends. Joining me this week, we have Frank Bazzani back on the show. How you doing, Frank?
Good. How are you doing, Trevor?
Doing good. This is your first show with us in the video podcast era, since we've been doing that this month here as part of year 2 of That Nerdy Site. And it's been a little while since like you and I have actually just caught up. So we spent like a good half hour or so chatting and just catching up on stuff before we sat down to actually record this episode. But how you doing? How you been for all of our listeners out there?
Definitely been doing pretty good. One of the things I thought was funny I wanted to mention for this podcast was when I had to go try to get into Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, I haven't logged in so long, it just logged me out.
Okay.
So like not only did I have to update the app, I had to like log back in, and then I even had to be like figure everything out. And I thought like, man, I really haven't watched anything on Disney Plus since the last time I was on this show. And I was like, I don't know what that says about me or Disney Plus. But the other thing I thought was funny too is I also, because of that, I haven't seen The Mandalorian season 1 or 2,
Uh-huh.
but I have seen this holiday special, just in
Okay.
case anyone was wondering.
Yeah, there you go. Nice. Yeah, it's like if anything, I've at least been watching and keeping up with The Mandalorian season 2 on it. And then I've also hopped. I mean, obviously for the sake of this show, I've been catching up or watching something every week. But I've done a lot of solo episodes in the last few months. Yeah, it makes sense that if you haven't been on since, I don't know, whatever last Disney Channel original movie we watched together, yeah, it makes sense that you wouldn't have necessarily been keeping abreast of everything on there.
That's what gets me to log into their platform though, and like what's probably the worst way is like it's just that's the only way to absorb this content. And I get they have Star Wars, they have Marvel and everything, that's great, but
Mhm.
like yeah, I don't know. There's like I've seen there's a ton of the stuff they have that I've seen recently, but I love this like old stuff that like I haven't seen in forever, and then we get to just sit down and talk about it. Because I went through the list because I was trying to find something we could watch together again, and I saw they have Can of Worms on
Mhm.
there,
Yep.
and I was like, oh great, I was like, let's do an episode.
Yeah, I mean that's I've that one has come up a couple times in the suggestions section, specifically I think on a lot of the Logan episodes, because with Logan we've done Phantom of the Megaplex, and we did Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, and we watched Halloween Town was one of the most recent ones we watched, that probably had Can of Worms on there as like a suggestion, because it's like it just comes up as like, hey, you're watching a Halloweeny kind of themed thing, here's Can of Worms. And it's one I like. Every time I look at it, I'm like, I don't know if I've seen that one or not. As we found out on the Halloween Town episode, because I'd said many a time, I was like, I don't think I've ever actually watched Halloween Town, and turned out I had, but I definitely didn't have like the a mortal reverence for it that like Logan did.
Mhm.
And the like, oh, I just like he watched that like every Halloween or something like that. I was like, that just wasn't
It
my scene. So
it was a thing every Halloween because then it became like a
yep,
series because there's like 3 or 4 of
yep.
those, and like it was a thing, like, and like, I liked them too, like I was like, I remember though that was their like holiday or Halloween marketing, like they had that on lock every year, like
Yeah.
ready to go.
And I think what it came down to that we looked at was like when that came out versus like where I was. It like I think it came out in like 1997 was Halloween Town. And so that would have been like right when I was getting ready to get into like high school and stuff. And so if it was just like a Halloween kind of thing, I was probably like hanging out with like friends at Halloween parties or trick or treating or whatever, like hanging out with like that was the age that I was in. So I wasn't necessarily watching Disney Channel stuff, for a lot of those. But yeah, but we're not talking about Halloween Town today. Today we are talking about, as Frank mentioned, and as you've probably seen from the title of the episode, the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. And so the reason we're talking about that, I picked this one out because the trailer for that came out about a week ago. And I was like, oh, that looks like a cute, fun little thing. And I think it it had the potential for a lot of humor, especially if you watch like the 2 minute trailer that kind of came out originally for the thing. It's like, okay, they're gonna have some fun mashing up the different eras. And as a longtime fan of the Lego games, going all the way back to the Lego Star Wars games, um, Lego tends to have a fun way to find a new joke on the things. So I thought, hey, this would be a fun one for us to maybe sit down and do. Originally, we were going to try and have Logan on here as well with us, but he had a last minute thing kind of came up. It's his anniversary actually, and so his girlfriend surprised him with like a surprise anniversary dinner. So I think he watched the special, but he wasn't able to join us to discuss it on this episode. So it's just Frank and I. A little bit of history lesson on this. Obviously, it was originally released here this week, November 17th. That was another reason. It was like, hey, and we can do something that's like topical and like in the zeitgeist of Disney Plus, as opposed to Halloween Town from 20 years ago. But other notable releases of the time, of course, you have The Mandalorian Season 2 rolling out here on Disney Plus as we speak. It has a runtime of 47 minutes, so a nice little brisk, not like longer, basically 2 episodes of television, effectively. In the Star Wars timeline of things, as I said, it's kind of rolling out here alongside Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and then it takes place technically after The Rise of Skywalker, but I can't imagine it's really canon.
Yeah.
So the roll call for the film, who's who in it. The director here is Ken Cunningham, who has done a couple other Lego projects, Lego animated projects before, including Lego Marvel Spider-Man, Vexed by Venom, and then he also has done the 13 episodes of Lego Jurassic. Excuse me, Lego Jurassic World: Legend of Isla Nublar. So basically,
I had
yeah.
sorry, I had no idea these Lego things were like such a big thing. Like
Oh
I've
yeah.
heard of like Lego Movie and Lego Batman, but even after watching this, like there was a recommendation for like 20 other Lego Star Wars things, and
Yep.
and you just said Spider-Man, like I had no idea this was such a huge thing.
Yeah,
It makes sense
if you
though, and
go
they're good.
into if you go into the I mean, this is like, I would say they range very much from like Lego Movie and Lego Batman Movie are like the high end, like they designed those to be released in theaters. Then everything else is like super kiddie. I would say they're probably more in line with those very early Lego games where it wasn't like they weren't even like adding voices into stuff. I mean, these do have voices, but it was like that animation style. This I would say is like the probably the midway point. It's like they clearly put more resources into this because they knew this was going to be a bigger recognized special. But yeah, if you go into the Marvel section or the Disney or the Star Wars section of Disney Plus, there's like whole chunks of just like Lego this, Lego that, Lego this, Lego that, for both of those franchises. And I think there's even a lot of like Lego Disney things, just kind of it's like an animated shorts style that they have, and yeah, the like pretty much spoilers for the like end section of the episode where we get into like, here are all the other things that Disney Plus suggests. It's all Lego Star Wars stuff. The writers on this episode is on this piece is David Shane, who the only things that really jumped out at me and I was like, oh, I've heard of that before, where he had done a couple episodes of Phineas and Ferb. And even though Phineas and Ferb isn't a show I've ever seen, it's a show I've at least heard of. And then he has done a lot of these Lego things. So that seems to be kind of where he's getting his bread and butter. And then starring, it's an interesting mix of like people that have done a lot of these Lego things, as well as like some of the actual voice talent or some of the voice talent that has done a lot of other Star Wars stuff. So I kind of have those in a couple different groups here. But of our main cast of characters, we have Helen Sadler here playing Rey. She also has voiced Jyn Erso in some of the extended Star Wars stuff, like the Battlefront games. And then this jumped out at me, and Frank and I were talking about this right before we sat down and recorded. She is the voice of Elizabeth Megafig, in Bugsnax. If you've seen the Bugsnax trailer, she's like the Australian, explorer person in Bugsnax. So I was like, hey, it's Bugsnax all around. Omar Miller here is playing Finn. And I pulled this one in here specifically when I thought Logan was going to be on the show, because one of his earliest acting credits is he was in The West Wing in a very iconic episode called Election Day, where Charlie is kind of tasked with like taking care of a couple of like big brother, little brother kind of kids, and one of them is old enough to vote, and so he takes this kid to vote, and Omar Miller played the big kid that was old enough to vote. So that was like the super deep cut that I pulled, especially for Logan, who obviously not able to end up doing the show. But he also was on CSI Miami for many years, doing 63 episodes on that show. And he's been on Ballers, had 47 episodes on Ballers. And recently has been Raph in Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series.
Oh, nice.
And then also he is currently, I believe, on CBS in the sitcom or I don't know if it's a sitcom. I don't know what it's called. It's called The Unicorn. He's in that show.
A show I've never heard of.
Yeah.
That's apparently on CBS, and I'm sure has
Same.
5 million views every week.
Probably, yeah. That's like it jumped out at me. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. But he seems to have been doing pretty good for himself in terms of voice work and steady gigs over the years. Jake Green here is playing Poe, who I highlighted because this year alone in video games, he is credited as additional voices in Final Fantasy VII Remake, Tilo 2, and Spider-Man Miles Morales. He was also in the 2018 Spider-Man game as an additional voice. So again, kind of like prominent, like one of those other kind, like not necessarily named character voices, but he's been making the rounds there in a lot of games this year. Matt Sloan playing Darth Vader here has been Vader in a number of other Star Wars things, all the way back to Star Wars The Force Unleashed. And I think he probably broke into that role because he went viral in his series Chad Vader, like Day Shift Manager or something like that. I want to say it was like, I don't know if it was like Funny or Die or College Humor or something, but it was like one of those kinds of like YouTube things where he was just like, what if Vader was like a shift manager at a grocery store or something like that. And so he did that. And like parlayed that into actually playing Vader and things. Trevor Duvall here plays Emperor Palpatine. He was Andrea Rodea in Final Fantasy VII Remake earlier this year. And he has been Rocket Raccoon in a lot of the animated Marvel things in recent years, including Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers Assemble series that both ran from 2015 to 2019. And he's also played Palpatine in a lot of these other Lego Star Wars things over the years. And then lastly of this kind of like primary batch of people, you have Matthew Wood playing Kylo Ren. He is a sound editor by day, but he is probably best known as the voice of General Grievous. So I threw this in there as a nod and shout out to Chloe Naylor, former nerd here, and her deep, deep love of General Grievous. In addition to playing Kylo Ren, I believe he also plays Dio, the little droid from Rise of Skywalker.
This is kind of like future spoilers, but like there is a part where Kenobi says hello there, and there's no Grievous in this entire thing, and I was like, what? Like they didn't use Grievous at all? Like during this entire special? Like
there were a couple of interesting choices where I was like, that's like you have these people, why didn't you use them? From the kind of bucket of people reprising their roles, you have Anthony Daniels, of course, best known as C-3PO. He makes a cameo here. Billy D. Williams playing Lando, gets very excited about capes. D. Bradley Baker is the Clone Troopers in the Clone Wars series, and he kind of reprises the Clone Trooper roles in this. James Arnold Taylor plays Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Clone Wars and voices him in here. Including many incarnations of the hello there that they kind of.
I thought he did a good job on that.
Yeah, it was fun. Kelly Marie Tran makes a return as Rose Tycho. Matt Lanter, who plays Anakin in the Clone Wars series, is in here as Anakin. And Tom Kane, who's played Yoda in many of things, he's also the narrator of the Clone Wars series. He came back and is doing Yoda and / the narrator in this series. A little bit of trivia here. This features the celebration known as Life Day, which was first introduced in the original Star Wars Holiday Special, 1978. Now a source of humor for fans, the original television special, which had both live action and animated segments, was heavily criticized and mocked. Due to this, George Lucas bought all master copies so it would never be broadcast again. However, it is possible to find the special on the internet. Have you ever actually watched the holiday special?
Not like in full. I've seen clips from it because I've also seen those videos where people like pull stuff from it or like make fun of it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never sat down and watched it.
Yeah.
I definitely did say before this, I was like, I hope we get to see Chewbacca's family because this
Mm-hmm.
was like another Star Wars holiday special.
Yeah.
And then they were immediately in the first 2 minutes. I feel like they knew this was coming because they're immediately like, we're here to see Chewbacca's family.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they knew. They
Yeah.
knew this entire time.
One
Have
of
you seen it?
I've not. No, I'm in the same boat. I've seen like clips of it. Probably like I've probably seen as much of it from like Alamo pre-shows and stuff like that as I have from anything else. But yeah, I've never actually like sought it out and actually sat down and watched the whole thing. It's just kind of one of those things like I've heard about so many times and I know about through the lore of the thing, and I know a lot of like the details and stuff about it. One of my favorite discoveries in recent weeks here on that D Plus show came from the Frankenweenie episode I did a little while back, because not only did I discover on the Frankenweenie episode that the movie was based on a Tim Burton film that he did back before Beetlejuice for Disney in 1984. So it was like before he blew up. It was right before. I think it was like one of his, like a credit or two before he did Pee-wee's Big Adventure. But the writer of that original Frankenweenie was the same guy who wrote the holiday special, the Star Wars holiday special.
Oh,
So I was like, hey, it's like I was like that just blows my mind, because I just like I never even think about somebody having written that thing. It's just something that just existed, and it just in my mind has always just been like it came into being, and yeah, George Lucas doesn't like it, but like somebody wrote it. And then similarly tied to again previous episodes, I guess, of this, there's a if you obviously haven't watched The Mandalorian, there's also the behind the scenes series on The Mandalorian, and one of the things they talk about in that series is the gun that the Mandalorian has is based off of the gun Boba Fett has in the holiday special. And there's a little segment where Jon Favreau is kind of like George Lucas came to set on The Mandalorian, and he kind of like pulls George aside, or at some point is like, see the gun, it's like it's based on the holiday special, and Jon Favreau basically just didn't know that George Lucas like hates the holiday special and had nothing to do with the holiday special. So he was just kind of like, yeah, I didn't really work on that. And so it's like a kind of like a humbling moment there for Jon Favreau when he was so excited about this nerdy thing that he thought he was putting in there for George, and George was like, I don't appreciate your thing. So another fun little callback that we have here. The word tip yip first appeared in Ben Burtt's 2001 book Star Wars: The Galactic Phrasebook and Travel Guide as the Ewokese translation for fowl, as in domesticated hen or rooster. As of 2019, various dishes such as fried Andorian tip yip are served at Galaxy's Edge, the Star Wars themed section of Disney. Another thing on top of that wasn't really in the trivia that I will highlight is the idea of roasting stuff via an engine. That's basically like the if you go into the cantina in Star Wars Land at Disneyland, like I think some of the menu items say like they were roasted over a pod racer engine or something like that. And that also has gotten a callback in one of the recent episodes of The Mandalorian. One of the characters is seen at some point kind of roasting meat over from at the back of a pod racer engine. So nice little nod there. And then lastly, as you kind of mentioned here, in the original Star Wars Holiday Special, all Wookiees wore red robes on Life Day. In this version of Life Day, there are no red robes, but we do see Chewbacca's family, which was very present in the first one. So I pulled in this trivia yesterday, I think, when I was putting together the doc. I did look at the IMDb like right before we started recording. I didn't pull this trivia in, but I will highlight it in here, because one of the trivia items now talks about the fact that the original Life Day and the original Holiday Special centers centers around Chewbacca's family, including his wife. Uh, and all of them do make an appearance in this one. And then like the wife doesn't really seem to have a problem when Maz Kanata comes in and says, "Where's my boyfriend?" and they go have adventures around the ship. So I was like, I didn't think about that, but I also just typically don't think of Maz Kanata as having a wife. And looks like I lost Frank here for a second. So yeah, there he's coming back. So let's give him a second to get situated back in here.
Sorry about that.
Hey, I can hear you. Is your video okay? There now. Your video is coming back. Everything okay? Just got disconnected.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Yeah, it just like totally dropped out.
Oops. Well, no worries. So yeah, I was mentioning that like they don't seem to have any problem with the fact that like Maz is running around saying like, "Hey, where's my boyfriend?" Despite the Chewie's wife being around, I guess.
They're progressive, like
Yeah,
they have like an open relationship.
yeah,
Like it's well, I was gonna say it's the future, but it's actually a long time ago in a galaxy far away.
indeed, yeah, and yeah, maybe I mean after 200 years, I don't know necessarily when in the timeline Chewbacca got married. I don't know if he was married when Han Solo meets him, and Han Solo has just been keeping him from his family for these last 60 years or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting to think of like, especially some of the other like, if this were really canon, what does that mean for things? Kind of connotations of things, which is why I definitely don't think it's canon. But speaking of that, like one of the things I like low key like got a kick out of is the idea that if this were canon, the second Death Star and the climax of Return of the Jedi is all happening on Life Day is just amusing to
Yeah,
me. So yeah, I
and
got a
nobody
kick out
ever
of that.
referenced it.
Exactly. Yep. Nope. Nope. Outside of Darth Vader here giving Emperor Palpatine a mug. Yep. You never would have known it was Life Day there on the second Death Star, the day that it blew up. Um,
But we do know that is canon.
yeah.
If you go back
Clearly.
to George Lucas's re-edits, you could see the mug floating after the Death Star 2 blows up.
There you go. So yeah, what did you think of this special here, Frank?
I really enjoyed it. Like I was pleasantly surprised because like I had kind of said I wasn't really familiar with a lot of these like smaller Lego things. And to be honest, I haven't actually even seen like the bigger movies either. I just like even though I would even call myself like a fan, I just like haven't seen the movies or anything they've been doing with these. So I just kind of went in blind and I just like I thought it was really fun, especially the way they played with Star Wars. They even went deeper than I thought they would with like McClunky
Hmm.
and some other things. Like they even took some shots at like the sequel trilogy, which I really enjoyed because I mean, like I liked it, but I didn't have problems with it. But there was one joke I can't remember what it is. I almost went back to watch through the whole like part of it just to see again. But there was one joke where I was like, wow, Disney let them really just put that in there. Like they're really just taking shots at the sequel trilogy like that.
Was it
Um,
it was like Kylo talking to Palpatine about like, yeah, he throws you down a reactor shaft and there's no coming back from that. Because it like
yeah,
definitely has a veiled like, yeah, Rise of Skywalker is kind of dumb.
I think it might have been that, honestly, because I definitely remember being like, wow, they really just did that. But I also loved like how much of a bit the reactor shaft became.
Hmm.
Like, because I was recounting it. I didn't go blow by blow through the whole story, but I was telling my roommate a little bit about it, and he liked Star Wars. So I was telling him like, yeah, he tells him that he throws him down the reactor shaft, and then he's like really mad about it. And I even love that he's like, you threw me down the reactor shaft, and he's like, no, I didn't. And
Yeah,
he's like,
well, not
but you
yet,
will.
but you will. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like God, there's just some funny things in there that made me laugh. The first one that really got me, I went and told my roommate about it too. Was it's when she jumps into Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon
Hmm.
in they're locked in the room, and Obi-Wan is just slamming his head into the desk, and
Yeah,
he's like, "Who cares about a trade
yeah.
dispute?" I was like,
Bored,
that
boring,
that
boring,
got
bored,
me.
bored, bored. Yeah, yeah. I that was where for me I think the special really started to like take shape,
Mm,
and started to be what the trailer kind of like suggested it was going to be. The all this stuff happening like in current day in life day, I was just kind of like, that's all, take it or leave it. I don't like, none of that really like wowed me. It was
hmm
when Ray starts playing with time, and you start kind of going back into those iconic moments for better or worse, and seeing like the moment before something happens or the moment after something happens, seeing like the characters react to all that stuff. Yeah. I also enjoyed that particular, like going back to Obi-Wan, and yeah, Obi-Wan in particular, just being super bored about that, because that's in fitting with where Obi-Wan was as a character kind of at that point. And it's also like, I think you mentioned McClunky. I think the movie definitely pulls from like some of the meta moments and the memes around
Mm,
the series pretty well. Yeah, like McClunky was one in particular. I was like, oh, but, like, okay, this is definitely like fresh, because
yeah,
McClunky obviously is something. I mean, admittedly, it's a year old at this point, because that's when the when Disney Plus launched, and all the new Star Wars trailers and the random new cut that includes McClunky were added in there.
because why?
But yeah, it's still like, oh, yep, they're not pulling a punch from that, at least. That was one moment I liked. I we've already talked about it a couple times, but like the multiple hello there's, because you have it both when Ray kind of encounters Obi-Wan and older Anakin, on that like elevator thing, and Obi-Wan says hello there, but then also when like you have the three different Obi-Wans kind of falling in, and all three of them say it. I was like, I appreciate that, as somebody that like says hello there and doesn't even think I'm referencing Revenge of the Sith or whatever, but I probably am. I appreciated that was in there, and then also you have the great little bit of old Han and young Han,
Mm.
basically old Han saying like, so do you want to shoot first or should I? Recognizing that both of them would shoot first. I appreciated that as well. Yeah. Any other like thoughts or highlights that kind of jumped out at you? Like I said, for me, I thought it took a little while to get going, just in general, but once you start kind of mashing up the timelines, I thought that was when there were a lot more fun little moments. Ultimately, I was probably a little disappointed in the thing, because I just thought it was going to be more
Mm.
like the trailer,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the trailer. It seems to me kind of was definitely like picking and choosing some of the best little gags,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't a ton more beyond that, really. And it certainly, again, all of like the Life Day stuff around it, and like Ray's, like the things that get us to that point. I was like, it's a necessary evil, I guess, but like I could have done without all that. I would have been happy if I think I pitched this to Logan as basically like Robot Chicken meets like Lego. And I would have been happy if it had probably just been like a series of weird little skits, like a Robot Chicken special,
Mm-hmm.
compared to this. But ultimately, like, it's fine, it's fun. It's not something I need to go back and like revisit anytime soon. But I had a good enough time with it that I didn't regret the thing I will say the most about it is it got me excited for the Lego game that's going to be like the
Mm-hmm.
whole Skywalker saga. I look forward to like, I wish that had already come out, but I'm guessing that got like bumped and pushed because of COVID stuff. So whenever it comes out next year, I'm excited to like really get in and play that. Any other thoughts from you there?
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you said, because I think it does take a little while to get going. Because, like I said, it really didn't start. I think you're on the same page too, but it didn't really start hitting for me until that Obi-Wan moment. Like, that's when I was like on board. And then I think there's a lot of funny stuff after that. But yeah, like all the stuff that I loved about it and the stuff that I want to talk about, or the stuff that I remember, is all the like time traveling, playing with different characters, meeting each other, and things that I find fascinating. Like, uh, when he's like, "I'm gonna go 40 years into the future. I want to see how I'm doing."
Yeah,
Like, and then
I,
they
yeah.
just bust in on Kylo. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, the whole Kylo shirtless bit was like, okay, clearly like that's the meme, and everybody's like discomfort about that. I was like, okay, that's funny. I thought it like went maybe a beat or two longer than it needed to. But I did appreciate that, like, Palpatine in particular almost felt more like a Robot Chicken version of Palpatine than like
yeah,
the
definitely.
Palpatine I really think of when I think of the series. Because it was
Darth
just,
Vader too, kind of.
yeah, a little bit. Like it was Darth Vader wanting to be like the proud father kind of thing. And we see that in the like, my son, these two binary sons, bit. But yeah, then like it's very much like Papa Palpatine that's just like fed up with everything. Like Vader is just nothing but a disappointment. Um, and I appreciated just kind of his like recurring like less talky, more fighty kind of like that mentality of that character, even if it betrays like what that character realistically is like in the series. I thought it was a fun little like diversion away from that, including like, okay, yeah, tell us the story, but can you put a shirt on first? Being a fun little Palpatine bit there. Yeah, go
And
ahead.
another one that I had particularly liked was obviously kind of the ending in like the throne room. There was like the one moment that I thought was really funny too was when Rey is trying to like explain to Luke what to do or whatever, and
Hmm.
he's like, "Yeah, I got it. Fight everybody in a black cave."
Yep.
Like,
Yep. This isn't my first rodeo. Yeah, that kind of that mentality. Yeah. Um, that was another one. In that sequence, I like that both like pre A New Hope Luke and Return of the Jedi Luke, like Kylo gets mad at both of me, and both of them are like, "I have no idea who you are, kid. Like, what did I do to you?" I like that like that's something that they come back to. I like it's a really dumb thing, but I got a kick out of the recurring like this was one of probably the most Lego kinds of jokes in here, but the blue milk carton that like
yeah,
New Hope Luke is always going back to and leaving like a blue milk mustache. I got a kick out of that,
and
and
then
then
she like puts it on his body when he's like laying there at the
yeah,
end.
yeah. There's that, and Kylo freezing it like he freezes the blaster bolt like the first time we meet him. That was another like okay, that's a fun little like take on Star Wars and the iconography of it because there is so much of it that is just like, yep, they're just directly ripping, especially in that closing sequence there of like, yep, here's just a whole bunch of like Force Awakens images, but instead of the lightsaber, it's going to be this key that like Kylo tries to pull, but Rey actually gets and stuff like that. Um, I almost like I almost wish there had been a reference to the fact that Rey was Palpatine's granddaughter hidden
Yeah,
in here
same.
somewhere. Like
I thought that was weird
it's
that they didn't talk about that.
yeah, especially when you have like Kylo, excited to see his like grandpa, and Vader being like,
Yeah,
wait, grandpa, what? um,
yeah.
yeah, I thought it was weird that like that was another thing that like maybe they just didn't want like they had their little dig at Rise of Skywalker. Maybe they didn't want to like put too much thought behind the rest of the implications there. Um,
Because
yeah,
there's like a spot for it too, because they have that like one-on-one conversation, and I think doesn't he say at some point to like join him? Like, doesn't he
mm,
try to get her to become like his apprentice? And I'm like, that's when you put it in though. Like,
yeah,
that's when he tells her, or she already knows,
yeah,
because this is after. It just that's the one thing that obviously this is like a fun thing that's not canon, but that was one of the things where I was like, they never mention it at all. It's almost like they were. I'm assuming somebody maybe at Disney was like, no, you take that one out. Like
yeah,
that one's too far. That
yeah.
one's too far.
That could have been, and because the Kylo that gets introduced here is like post Last Jedi, pre Rise of Skywalker Kylo. He just named himself Supreme Leader. He just killed Snoke. I also like the little bit of like, you wouldn't throw me down a reactor, would you? And we see the flashback to him killing Snoke and betraying Snoke. He'd be like, throw you down a reactor? No, I wouldn't do that. Like
Yeah.
I appreciated that little nod to again that like iconic visual moment there. But yeah, it that was one of the things that was just like it's weird that like as meta as they're being in some of these moments that they didn't call attention to the fact that Rey is fighting with her grandpa there. Um, Admittedly, he doesn't know that he's her grandpa, but still, I
Yeah,
think
I guess
like
that's probably the best point on
yeah,
that.
yeah. Um, trying to think. Oh, like I did. We mentioned Mandalorian that you haven't seen, but I do appreciate like the one little moment
Mhm.
that is like a hat tip to Mandalorian is them just going through there and everybody being like, oh, how cute, and then they just kind of like immediately progress through, and it's like that's it. That was the Mandalorian to call out. We don't need any more of that. I almost would have liked to have seen like. I guess it wouldn't make sense to have like a Rebels call out because none of the core cast of Rebels really ties into the Skywalker saga. But maybe another Clone Wars kind of shout out or something like that
Mhm.
would have been an interesting tie. Yeah.
because they do the bit about the clones,
Yeah.
so there was totally room where they could have worked like clones, or like I mean they definitely had like I feel like a tight special, and I'm not even saying like I wish this was longer because I'm sure it would have been probably impacted it worse, but I feel like there was things they left on the table that they just like totally left there.
Yeah, maybe there will be like deleted scenes of like other little snippets that they like went through. I also really liked, just on that note, one of my favorite little like vignettes of that like past and present kind of meeting was the Hoth sequence where like Vader's
Hmm.
walking in and then Vader walks in and they have like the Vader fight and the stormtroopers are being like, but you're right there, and they're like, that's not me, it is me. Oh, let get the girl. Like that little the little like what if Vader met Vader. I thought was a fun little like that's a something obviously that we wouldn't see anywhere else. So throw it in here and have a little fun moment with it.
I I totally spent too much thought like the next day on the because there's the part where on they go to Mustafar
Mm-hmm.
where Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting. That's the I have the high ground moment
Yeah,
where he becomes Vader officially. And that's where I'm like, but then there's the part where in this Vader drops into that moment fighting Ren. So I'm like, here's Vader, and then you have Anakin just like 2 feet to the left about to become Vader. And I was like they don't comment on that ever, but I know I was like that was a funny thing. I thought they like dump Vader into the moment where he becomes Vader.
yeah. You could have had Vader scream out at Anakin like, "Get the high ground, kid," or something like that.
That would have been funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would have been like a better way to use that because they have a setup there without any punchline or anything. Like nobody ever realized that they set up that scenario.
yeah, yeah. Um, One of the last little things I want to give a special nod to that I appreciate. I did so I went back and like because I originally watched it a couple nights ago and I was like very sleep deprived. So like preparing for this episode, I was like, I need to rewatch it to like remember moments like this to come in and talk to. And the first time I watched it, I was like, that's a weird outfit for Yoda to be wearing. And watching it with like a fresh set of eyes here at the end, Yoda, I appreciate, is wearing basically the costume that a character called Sam the Snowman wears, and he is the narrator
Oh,
from the claymation Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer
yeah.
short or movie or whatever. And so he's basically like, it is basically just a direct nod to that holiday special. I appreciated that. That was a fun little like
Yeah.
visual gag, visual reference that like the target audience of this show, if you think of kids, you know, definitely wasn't around when that thing came to be, and maybe they know what it is, but probably not. But I appreciated that it was in there for the older fans like me and stuff.
That hit home for me because that even the when I watched it or whatever that pops up, I immediately got that because I was like, I love that special. And then there's even they did like an updated one in the '90s that has the same character wearing the same thing, but it's
Yep.
like terrible CGI.
Yep.
But I was like, yeah, like I have the fondness for probably even both of those, so I was totally like, yeah, I love that. Like that's funny.
Hmm.
I do love the idea though that you just while you seeing that even kind of being sleep deprived without the context, you're like, why did they put Yoda in like this weird like
Why?
vest with
Why?
like a hat
Yeah.
like.
What's like? I was like, that's gotta mean something. I just don't know what it is. I just can't. I
That
can't. I
is
can't register it right now. Is basically where I was at on that.
It's extended universe.
Yeah. Any other highlights or moments you want to give some love to here?
Man, there was definitely I feel like a lot of good moments. I think I talked about pretty much all the ones I did like. The one that there I will say the next day I was definitely still thinking about it. There was just moments I would think about that would kind of make me laugh or whatever, like while I was at work doing the next thing. The one I totally forgot about until you had mentioned it earlier is when they're doing the Life Day thing at the end. And Billy D. Williams gets that gift,
Hmm.
and he's like, "What is he saying?" He's like, "Scarf, scarf, scarf," or
He's
whatever.
like,
And he opens it.
I hope it's a cape. I hope it's a cape. I hope it's a cape. And then yeah,
Yeah,
the not Admiral Akbar, but the Admiral Akbar like characters like it's a wrap.
yeah, like that got me. I just don't know why. Like I know it's stupid or like cheeky, but I just thought like I don't know. That just is like something that I just think is like funny. Where he's just like it's a rap, and
Yeah.
then like then they just cut away and move on to something else like 2 seconds later.
Yeah. It's just like you think about like, yep, Billy D. Williams just like probably literally phoned in that performance, especially in COVID times. Probably just like, yep, he just like spoke into a microphone and it said like, please be a cape, or and also the I appreciated the like shout out to Max Rebo of all people, of all
Mhm.
characters. Like they hire him for the the Life Day party. There's like nobody's listened to this guy in 30 years. And then Lando comes in. It's like I love that guy. Makes perfect sense with the timing of everything. Um, yeah, and you just think about that and be like, yep, he showed up. Like it definitely makes me wonder like if they even tried to go out to some of like the primary cast of characters to see if they want to come back, because I mean they got Rose back, so
Mhm.
like who else did they maybe try and reach out to, and other people were just like, no, I don't really want to do that, or what, but um
Because I
oh
felt
yeah,
like that was one of the things that drug it down a little bit, and it's not like terrible. It doesn't make it terrible, but it's like some of the characters are like noticeable that it's not them,
yeah,
and like even the person doing the impression, like it's like yeah, like you're close or whatever, but you can just tell this is somebody doing an impression of somebody.
mm-hmm.
But there is a couple other characters that I do think like did a pretty good performance, because even like you said too, like Palpatine isn't Palpatine. He's like this kind of like robot chicken Palpatine, but I thought he did like a pretty good performance of like of doing like a Palpatine type like kind of voice.
Yeah,
Like there's some people that are like you can really not notice that much, but there's some other ones where it kind of took me out of it a little bit. Mostly with like the characters we know from like the sequel trilogy. I don't know why it was easier to like I don't know, maybe the people are just more used to doing like Obi-Wan impressions
yeah,
and like Palpatine impressions and stuff, but it was so weird to hear like Rey and Finn and Poe impressions where I'm like you're just kind of like not the person I know, but
yeah,
I'm kind of like because Poe showed up and it took me like a second to figure out who Poe was supposed to be because he's not dressed like Poe. He was wearing a Christmas sweater,
yeah,
and I was like, who is this?
yeah, yeah. I was kind of in the same boat. Like Ray in particular, like it seems like that voice actress definitely has like an understanding of the dialect that Daisy Ridley has, but just doesn't like, and she nails it for like certain words here and there. But it seems like it's very
Mhm.
much built around that more than like being Ray. And same with Finn. I was like I didn't quite get the feeling of like it being John Boyega. Certainly. So yeah, I agree with you on that. In that those were probably the ones that stood out the most, as opposed to like it was like one of those things of like, yeah, that's a decent enough Luke Skywalker, even though you have like Mark Hamill being this like acclaimed voice actor himself. Like that's another one where it's like I feel like he could have come back and done it, but maybe they just couldn't meet his rates or something like that. But um or maybe they just were like, well, like maybe a lot of it was these are the people who have been doing the Lego versions of these characters for us for a while now, so we're just gonna kind of stick with them. Who knows? But yeah, that was definitely something that jumped out at me as well. Well, let's dive into the report card and grade this sucker. So on a scale of A plus to F, what do you give the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special there, Frank?
I think I'm gonna go pretty high because it's definitely enjoyable. And because even for me, just being like somebody who's miserable all the time, I had a good time. So if anybody out there is like has a family and is looking for like and loves the Star Wars and Lego and all that stuff, I think it's a good time. Like I feel like you could do so much worse. And even like we were talking about not to just ramble, but we were talking about the decoms earlier. Like that's the kind of shit that we grew up with,
Mm-hmm.
and then so something like this, I feel like has so much more like jokes and production value and stuff thrown in for like family entertainment. I think I would go pretty high, like B or B plus probably.
Yeah, I think I'm safely in like the B category of like, yeah, it's not
Mhm.
like the greatest, but it's fun, it's fine, it doesn't overstay its welcome too much. And yeah, and there are weirdly placed deep cuts for like bigger fans of the series. Like one that even just jumps out at me right now is when Palpatine's trying to figure out like what his future is like, or like, am I still Emperor of the whole galaxy? No. How about a small part of the galaxy? No. A Tabana gas mine? It's like that's a super deep cut that you're pulling like from extended canon lore of like to pull Tabana gas mine out of like nowhere, that like nobody else is gonna get. But I appreciated like that little like we're gonna speak to the real diehards for like a couple seconds here, just as a fun little gag. So yeah, it gets a firm B for me. It's definitely something that like especially if you have like kids and it's definitely family friendly fare. It doesn't quite do that thing that I think like Pixar of all people, and even really the Lego movie and Lego Batman really did great of like, yes, it is a fully for all ages, like fun for the whole family kind of thing. This is definitely much more. It's fun for the kids. There are a couple things in there that the adults and the parents will like, but I think it's definitely much more geared towards kids in that like balancing act of things. So yeah, B for me as well.
I agree with that, your last point there, but I felt like there was enough for even just me, like by myself, where I felt like I got enough enjoyment out of it to be like, oh, that was funny. Like there were some funny things in there, especially I guess, of course, one of the main cruxes being you have to be a Star Wars fan.
Yes,
Like I
of
got all the
course.
jokes.
Yeah.
So like, and I was like, and of course, like you said too, I feel like they definitely hit the meme thing pretty heavy. But that was fine for me. Like I like that they steered into that a little bit. And then, like I said too, I like that they made some knocks at the sequel trilogy, even when he's like, Death Star 2 is a little derivative. Should we maybe call it Star Killer Base? And
Yeah.
he's like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But
Yeah, but even that, like, it comes back when Kylo Ren's like, "That's yeah,
mm,
I know you built a second Death Star. That's how we got inspired for Star Killer Base." And Palpatine's like, "Oh, I love that name," and that's the moment where Vader feels most Robot Chicken Vader because he's just like, "Aw," like because it's
yeah,
clearly just a dig at him. So yeah,
I liked it too.
yeah. Go ahead.
When he was like, he's like, do you have a helmet? And he puts it on, or he reforges it for him or
Hmm.
whatever, and he puts it on, and Vader's just like, real original.
Yeah,
Like he's like pouting in the corner.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. So yeah, there are definitely some of those moments for us, but I think more so it's just it doesn't like it aims for a lot of the low hanging fruit on those moments as opposed to like really finding like a new approach to the joke. I guess is what I would say on that. And maybe that's just because like so many of these things are jokes that I've already made about the series before or something. I don't know. But other extra credit, other suggestions if you like Star Wars, the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special here. As I said, it's all Lego Star Wars stuff, so strap in. You have Lego Star Wars All Stars, Lego Star Wars The Resistance Rises, Lego Star Wars The Freemaker Adventures, Lego Star Wars Droid Tales, Lego Star Wars The Freemaker Adventures Shorts, Lego Star Wars All Stars Shorts, Lego Star Wars The New Yoda Chronicles Raid on Coruscant, and Lego Star Wars The New Yoda Chronicles Clash of the Skywalkers. Extracurriculars, so you like obviously you're not really watching anything else on Disney Plus, right, Frank? You watching anything else
yeah,
on just anything at this point?
not at this exact moment. I haven't watched a ton this year, but what I have spent time on is like HBO Max, and I finished my like Curb Your Enthusiasm catch up.
Okay.
So I do recommend it for anyone out there, completely wildly unrelated to this.
Yeah,
And if you're a fan of this, you might not like that entertainment.
very fair.
but yeah, like I think this was something super enjoyable. One thing I almost watched the Battle of Coruscant one because like it has like Anakin and like Obi-Wan on it, and I was like, I don't know, what if I just continue this, like, get some more like Lego jokes. But you're probably fair to what you said too, where those are probably like lower quality or like lower effort put
Yeah,
in.
yeah. I mean, like I would imagine pretty much all of those are definitely directed for the kids, in a way that like some episodes of Clone Wars probably are as well. I look at the Lego Star Wars animated stuff and I'm like, on their best day they're probably hitting like one of the weaker episodes of Clone Wars in terms of like quality of kind of the whole experience. So this definitely feels like it got like a leg up from that. But yeah, it's interesting because you mentioning Curb Your Enthusiasm and in particular HBO Max. I think one of the series I watched on HBO Max recently is the Harley Quinn series, which I
Mm.
think may be something that has like spoiled this kind of humor for me because that is taking such a stab at DC, its source material, but it's doing it in such an adult and like in your face kind of way that like I would love to see a Star Wars kind of thing really take a stab at that. And I constantly see it when I go through a lot of these things and see like Star Wars in people's credits because Star Wars Detours still shows up on a lot of
Oh
people's
yeah.
IMDb's as like in
It
production. because that's that
It
like
got canceled or whatever, like
exactly, yeah.
never came out. Yeah.
It's for those that don't know, Star Wars Detours was basically a robot, like it was by the same people who do Robot Chicken, and it was going to be a Star Wars animated series, and I believe they did like 100 episodes of the thing, like fully animated, had it ready to go, but then Disney bought Star Wars and basically scrapped the thing. So it's a thing that like was made and exists somewhere, and was just
They
gonna
they have a
be
whole TV show ready to
yeah, it
go.
was just going to be like basically a Robot Chicken meets Clone Wars kind of show. And yeah, who knows if we'll ever end up seeing it. I imagine like Disney probably owns it somewhere, and it might become a thing that eventually down the line they release. But seeing it just constantly show up at the top of people's like IMDb lists, because that's where like pre-production things go, is always like a reminder of like what could have been in terms of that style of humor that I'm looking for with Star Wars. So yeah, that just reminded me of that. Um, as far as
It's a
what
good
else,
poll, honestly.
yeah, as far as what else I've been watching on Disney Plus, it is pretty much The Mandalorian. I'm keeping up with that show here, and as we go into season 2, really enjoying how, like, I remember saying at some point that I basically the first things I watched on Disney Plus when it launched were I was watching The Mandalorian on a week to week basis, but I also binged through Star Wars Rebels because I'd never been able to watch that series. And when I ended that series, they had already announced that a new season of Clone Wars was going to come out, and I said like I would really want, like, what I really want is a new series or a new season of Rebels to see like what happens to those characters in between Return of the Jedi and basically the sequel trilogy. And Mandalorian is increasingly becoming like that sequel series. Basically, it's like a backdoor sequel as more characters from Star Wars Rebels kind of make their way into Mandalorian canon. So that's exciting, and I look forward to seeing kind of where that journey continues to go. So yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Frank, for joining me to talk about the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to or send some love to on the internet there, Frank?
I don't think so, not this week. But I got to get better about finding stuff to do that for.
That's quite all right. No worries. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will give a shout out to the ongoing Let's Play series that we have over at youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where I'm playing through all of the NES Classic games, kind of in order of North American release. This week, as of recording, this week's episodes were focused on Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. One of them I sucked at, and one of them I sucked a little bit less at. So you can go check out those Let's Plays, as well as any of the others that we've done on that series. So go check that out. You follow all of the latest from us over at That Nerdy Site, on Twitter, or thatnerdysite.com on the internet. If you liked what you heard, as always, please like, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you again for joining me, Frank. Thank you, audience, for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.